It was Take Your Drama and Not Your Mama to Court Day last week with New Jeans, Min Hee-jin, ADOR, HYBE, Source Music, ILLIT, B-Lift Lab, LE SSERAFIM, all jumbled up in this mess where the real world is hitting New Jeans in the face. This is now where reality starts to seep in. And it doesn't look like New Jeans is going to be able to really wiggle this situation no matter how many cookies and milk they bring to the pajama party. So last week we had one court date, which was a double feature. It was on the schedule. We knew that it was going to be the first hearing in the lawsuits of defamation against Min Hee-jin. Remember, B-Lift Labs, which is ILLIT, Source Music, which is LE SSERAFIM, both issued and filed their own lawsuits against Min Hee-jin because Min Hee-jin went blabbering her mouth, remember back at her press conferences in the spring of 2024, and used ILLIT and used LE SSERAFIM as justifications in her war against HYBE. And in that battle, by using ILLIT and LE SSERAFIM as tools, she essentially badmouthed the groups, accused the groups of plagiarism, and accused essentially the management of both of those sub-labels as being horrendous people. Well, they weren't going to sit back and just accept all this, although they kind of did at first, which they shouldn't have, because then people really bought into the story of Min Hee-jin. And we all know from the Jezebel Institute of Treachery, when you're trying to run a play like this, the truth will catch up to you. That's why you got to get out of the gate sprinting, do a Nancy Kerrigan, Tanya Hardin on the knees of your competitors so that they can't chase after you, because eventually the truth will catch up. But as long as you finish the race and you outpace them, then the truth doesn't matter. Now, the thing though is that it didn't work out that way for Min Hee-jin. And now the truth is catching up to her, but whether that truth translated into the court of law can actually create justice, that's another issue. So the specific issue at hand with the court world is what was said. Was it untrue? And essentially it is specifically focusing on the plagiarism aspect. Who gets to decide on plagiarism? Is it an expert or is it public opinion? Those two areas can be highly manipulated, but the judge themselves are trying to decide and asking the defendant and the plaintiff to help them out on which opinion is the right opinion to go with, whether this, what she said was true or untrue. Was it in the public interest or opinion? Because Min Hee-jin, if you're going to defame somebody or if you're saying bad stuff, but you're saying like, well, this is in the interest of public opinion, then you can sort of get out of it. How much should the damages be? Essentially, how much of a brand damage did occur and what was active or passive? Like there were specific advertising contracts, for example, that went down, specific metrics of social media that went down because of the damage that was inflicted upon ILLIT and LE SSERAFIM. So they're all trying to put this all into a soup and trying to parse it out and get the ruling done. But that is the court world. What we need to also keep in mind is the Jezebel world, where this really does, no matter how you parse out the specifics and what can be actionable in court, we really have to also keep in mind you never want to get to that stage. So we need to take a look at the Jezebel world that got us to that stage and hopefully prevent it there. Because what happened in this situation is that Min Hee-jin just used ILLIT and LE SSERAFIM in her battle against HYBE. So on some levels, if you really are trying to be empathetic and look at it from the perspective of, New Jean's mama, you can't use your own normal person lens. You can't just say, oh, nobody would be that crazy. Nobody would be that mean. Yes, there are people that would be so, and they all came out of the Jezebel Institute of Treachery. Not everybody can get in. And so you kind of have to think, wow, they're willing to do, like, that is pretty much a shock that is probably on the huge magnitude of, like, that's kind of like the end. The end of the finish line of a battle between two people, and it resulted almost in ILLIT being knocked out of the game, LE SSERAFIM being knocked out of the game, Source Music, B-List Music just being knocked out of the game. But to the Jezebel Institute of Treachery graduate, that was just along the way. She was willing to do damage that would ruin people's lives, careers, futures, hopes, dreams, everything. But just on the way, and to ensure that she could win against Bang Si-hyuk and HYBE. So imagine if there's somebody who just willy-nilly would just use chemical weapons or nuclear weapons just on their way in the battle and feel like, no, that's fine. But to the victims of like a chemical weapons attack or a nuclear attack, that is like the end of the world. That is like the biggest thing that they can happen to them. But for Miss JIT graduate, she just pushes them buttons along the way. And that is the horrific part of this situation. And that is also why we can't just use our Pollyanna lenses of like, well, nobody I know would do that. Look, not everybody, like I said, could get into the Jezebel Institute of Treachery. They do not look at SAT scores. They look at RAT scores, Ratchet Aptitude Test. How ratchet can you be? And from your extracurricular activities, how much have you proven that you can be ratchet in all areas of your life? Those are the people that get in. So the court of public opinion and the court of law look at the same situation differently. The court of law has to essentially go by the menu of laws and see if your situation triggers anything within the law and to what degree, so that we can compensate you for it. But both sides, court of law, court of public opinion, the unspoken thing a lot of the times that drives this is the why. They're talking about plagiarism, right? Whether or not Min Hee-jin used plagiarism accusations to damage ILLIT and LE SSERAFIM, and what would make logical sense. Because if you put on a Pollyanna lens and you're just like, oh, well, who would do that? I don't know anybody who would be that mean, or, oh, aren't you just being very pessimistic and thinking the worst of people and human nature? Yeah, in this kind of situation, you do. And you have to be able to go to that level of thinking, although when you really think about how simple it is, it's really not that deep. So we have to look at this action that occurred through the lens of why would Min Hee-jin, New Jean's mama, do something that is so sabotagistic? And if you look at the evidence, because we have actions that show truth, actions and words that Min Hee-jin has already spoken, texted, and has become part of our public dialogue, is that it's already documented that she hates other women. She herself is essentially a female version of a misogynist. That's why she had to go out and counter it by saying that she is the champion of women in an oppressive workplace. Now we're getting to see what the actual truth is, and the persona that she tried to sell hardest is a big clue. It's like a big red X on a treasure map of just put it in the opposite, and that's probably who she is. Because it looks like she really does seem to just want to use girls, and it's sad because I think it's a bit of this self-internalized misogyny, because she documented willing to even use herself in that way. So if she herself is willing to do the body lobby, and not just as a hobby, with executives, what do you think she expects of other women? Okay, so she doesn't seem to, at the core of it, really, really, really respect herself, because no self-respecting person would do all of this. And because of that situation, you don't, as in the Jezebel profile, the more you hate yourself, the more you have to express it in a way that tears other people down to deal with that sort of self-hate and self-shame. So this is not normal female jealousy. So once you put normal lenses on it and you kind of feel maybe guilty and you're just like, oh, well, I don't want to condemn her because, maybe I can feel the same way. Maybe, I've been jealous of other people and, maybe I've not been the kindest, but that's more of on the normal spectrum. It's not good, but it's more of on the normal spectrum. We're not talking about anything normal here. This is the dangerous kind. This is the pathetic and sad kind. This is the thing that ruins lives. And we're not supposed to just, look at it and shrug our shoulders, because there's a difference between like feeling jealous and then starting to weaponize that, because you start to then see them as a threat, which could be under the normal thing, not on the good thing. But when you start then making actionable items and be willing to destroy because you feel jealous of a threat, well, that's when you're starting a battle. That's when you're gonna be knee-deep in a war. And if you're in a war, you need to know that you're in the war, that you're on the battlefield. Don't be like one of these dumb people like, oh, well, I don't think anybody would hurt me like that. Well, yeah. Suit up, because you're in it. Now, we do have evidence from Kakao Talk that she even talked crap about her own New Jeans girls. So if Mama is willing to talk so much crap about her own girls, what do you think she's saying and thinking about other girls in other girl groups within the HYBE family? Probably not so good, because a person like this would, yes, criticize, of course, her own kids, but her own kids are also used as avatars for herself. And we all know that it did look like she wanted to be the sixth member of the New Jeans, and even rewound the clock to do that 90s nostalgia, which would be essentially her era of when she would have had her debut if she was gonna be a K-pop star. So these girls need to be protected because they are extensions of herself. They are objects that need to be molded in her image, controlled by her own volition, and any other girl group that threatens these girls, which is herself essentially, need to be destroyed, coming from the mind of a JIT graduate. So there is a clear foundation of the why. Like, why would New Jeans Mama be so casual about destroying other girl groups, especially when it seems like she needs to, and it becomes a very convenient and effective tool. So the why, I think, is already there. Like, she don't care. Her survival depends anyway on destroying the other girl groups. So, hey, why not use them in the battle? Because this is what gets me really upset about how she went about this and what she used all of this disparagement for. Total manipulation, and so many people bought it at first. So this is why I do think in her own mind, she's really not like attacking. What are you saying? Like, I wasn't really focused on ILLIT or LE SSERAFIM. They weren't really my focus, because I actually think they really weren't her focus. She is willing to just press them buttons in the control room and then go after who she was going after, which was essentially save her own butt and against HYBE. Now, remember the timeline. She was being investigated and audited in the first quarter, January, February, March, April of 2024 by HYBE for usurpation of management rights, or essentially trying to do corporate sabotage and steal ADOR, steal New Jeans, and cause a real huge financial damage to not only HYBE, but the K-pop industry itself. Now, that audit HYBE did announce and publicize, but she spun it around. She spun around in the public's mind about why that audit was taking place. Instead of it being like, oh, well, why were they auditing you? You know, did you have something to hide? Instead of people going in that direction, she switched the direction and said like, HYBE was auditing me because I brought up these plagiarism situations because all these other girl groups in the HYBE family were copying me. And then what she focused the public on is then kind of going through this puzzle, because people love puzzles, this mental puzzle of like, well, was it plagiarism or not? Plagiarism or not? But essentially what the puzzle should be focused on is, did she try to steal a company or not? Did she try to steal a company or not? And so we're still looking in the puzzle of like, well, look at their choreography. Oh, look at the hair bows, or look at the hanbok. She totally masterfully did that. But you can't run a trick for too long. However, she definitely did it long enough and enough people bought it, and it took a long time to unravel, but thank goodness it has. So on Courtroom Drama Day, January 10th, there were 2 hearings. So it looks like the same set of judges looking at both cases. So 4 p.m. we had B-Lift Lab, and then 4:30 p.m. we had Source Music. B-Lift Lab is suing for about $2 million. Source Music is suing for about $500,000. And remember, if it's over $1 million, not even $1 million shibok, which roughly translates to maybe like 800,000 on today's exchange rate, then that's definitely breach of contract, breach of trust with New Jeans' mama, which would essentially have no ability for her to collect on her stock options. Because remember, her big thing still, like she's not giving up on, is trying to get them stock options eventually somehow. You know, that can range from 500 million to the highest point, I think it was like 200 million or something like that, dollars-ish, depending on the exchange rate. And that is going to be knocked out with this, just from this one thing, if B-Lift Lab and Source Music win. Now, apparently the courtroom was full of reporters. Min Hee-jin didn't show up. It was only her lawyers. Also, Source Music and B-Lift Lab, the representatives didn't, the actual CEOs didn't show up. It was, the lawyers. It was a lawyer to lawyer thing, and that's pretty common, and that's why you hire a lawyer, so you don't have to drag yourself to court all the time. Now, this is a situation where they are really talking about the plagiarism. And remember, again, that is the definitely discussion for the courtroom to have, but it is going to be more technical. Now, this whole copying mess, it looks ridiculous. It really makes no sense, some of these claims. So the copycat claims that Min Hee-jin's side include, they had a global audition. We had a global audition. Sweetie, everybody has global auditions for new K-pop groups. Their debut styling. Hair, makeup, clothes. Let me tell you, I know firsthand, in Korea, there's like a stylist community. They all kind of, in some ways homogenize. You're gonna remember there were the whole thing about trying to get like a trademark on hair, like long black hair, and call that copying. Wow. So everybody got to get their hair colored. Yeah, they can't just be Korean. The concept, the hanbok, the choreography, the album design. Look at how like nowhere in this is actual music, and I wonder if you can actually start to make more of a specific claim in music, like as a singer, as these are music artists. So shouldn't copying claims also just be focused more on music? Because after all, it is the music product. So in a more technical, like legalistic way, I could see how the court could try to chop off all of the other extraneous things and say like, that is not what you guys actually produce. It is the music. Of course, you know, these days you can probably argue that, you know, K-pop is the entire package. So it does involve like concepts, design, hanbok, but I think that's actually where the court can probably grow in using this case as a litmus test of what counts as, you know, being involved in an actual music product that can be taken to court on, you know, if you are an artist. Because like if it's down to like what hairspray brand, oh, you better Aquanet it out of here. Now, the main thing that ILLIT and Source Music were both saying is that these claims, because they're so ridiculous, are meant to weaponize a false narrative, negative narrative, defamation against our group. Because nobody in the industry, because they said like, you know, somebody like Min Hee-jin, she's been in here for 20 years, nobody would use these as attacks. But to an unsuspecting public, they work. And therefore, if you're going to be using these attacks, you are attacking. It's not just an opinion or a concern or responding to public opinion. Min Hee-jin's side said that she was just trying to protect her group. Who protects by murdering? It is on, that's why I said that it's very important to start seeing it from a perspective of somebody that maybe you are not familiar with, but where somebody views threats as just like, you know, normal, healthy competition as deadly threats, that therefore it justifies having an extreme response that would knock somebody out. And it's a huge mental distortion. So Min Hee-jin's legal argument, though, was saying that the fans and the parents brought this up, and she was just responding. So you see the trickery of this. And it looks like it was so planned this way then, like you're planning your legal defense. So this is how you do it from the Jezebel Institute of Treachery. You want to say something defamatory against somebody, right? And you're wondering, how do I get out of this in terms of like defamation? Well, we already know that like a lot of these bots, a lot of these so-called public opinion responses that were accusing ILLIT and LE SSERAFIM of plagiarism were essentially media plays that you can buy yourself. They've traced a lot of these bots down to like a few IPs. Like it looked like it was maybe millions and thousands of people, you know, just saying these things, but it was really just like maybe like a few dozen, if that. And so what you do is then you say you are doing the defamation through these bot channels that you buy, and then when you publicly come out, you're just, remember the wrap-up smear that we went over? Then you just say, well, I'm just responding to all this chatter that I'm seeing online, and then you're repeating that chatter, and then you say like, well, this is just in the public interest and this is just opinion. Whereas B-Lift and Source are saying, that is not the case whatsoever. This is not just an opinion. This is not just her responding to a public opinion. That this was a deliberate and malicious attack. And if we're just even looking at, because then the court, like, again, they're going to be running around this puzzle about like, well, was it plagiarism or not? And then the court saying like, well, we're not familiar with the music industry. Well, if she gets her way, then, you know, you better believe that McDonald's and Burger King and Lotteria, they got something to watch out for. Because look, hamburger. Are you going to call that plagiarism? What if even one hamburger chain, which happened, one decides to use bulgogi sauce and have a bulgogi burger. All the other chains started using that bulgogi sauce, making their own bulgogi sauce. Is that plagiarism? And not to mention, let's just not even talk about the sauces. Let's talk about the lettuce, tomato, onions, and the cheese. Who's going to tell them that they have been involved in plagiarism criminality for decades? They're part of a plagiarism ring.
All Day King, 하루 종일 4,900원.
Now, BLIF Lab, the label of ILLIT, says that SNS followers dropped when there was all of this accusations, because they were known as like, ooh, the copycat girl group. Their album sales fell, and they even had ad contracts get canceled, like namely Wonhee's Pocari Sweat. Apparently she did really well for Pocari Sweat. She's been like upping them sales. Pocari Sweat, it sounds gross, but it's kind of good. It's like a lemon lime Gatorade, and it's supposed to replace your sweat. People don't care, okay? I mean, like, they don't care about the naming thing, although that naming thing would probably never work in the United States. So this is very specific. It's very much tied to a financial damage, and that works well in the courtroom. And it's not about, per se, the plagiaristic part, because even if it were true, but you can't really prove, we all know that we can't really prove. Nobody is suing each other over actual plagiarism. This is essentially this is essentially like the HYBE side accusing Min Hee-jin of using plagiarism charges to damage the brand of the other girl groups. But nowhere in this situation, if Min Hee-jin was so upset about plagiarism, how come she didn't launch a plagiarism lawsuit? Because you can't win it, because you can't prove it, because just because you use a hanbok, you use like a choreography, album design, fonts, like we're getting in, yes, we are getting into lettuce, tomato, and onion category here of what counts as plagiarism if she gets her way. And not only that, like all of the other plagiaristic claims against herself. And they're not even touching, they're just saying like, you know, that's pointless and it's useless, although it looks pretty plagiarized on your end, New Jeans Mama. And I'm glad that the Source Music and BLIF Lab side brought that up as well, saying like, well, if you kind of look at New Jeans, it looks like SES and it looks like TLC, but we ain't accusing you of plagiarism, but that looks why are you throwing stones when you live in a glass house? So, you know, this choreography that wasn't even hers to claim. This is Bollywood, okay? So if anything, we should be getting like a plagiarism lawsuit from India, you know, for all the K-pop. You know, some things are just components that go into the standard repertoire and practice of pop music and K-pop, and that concept, that framework was argued by the lawyers, Kim and Jang lawyers, you know, most expensive lawyers in Korea, for the judges to understand in terms of the Taekwondo world. So they were saying that, you know, there are a standard set of Taekwondo moves. Everybody's got to learn them. They're all on your test. You know, sort of like the whole, you know, the ballet thing, like isn't there like a set thing that everybody has to learn? And then how you do it. So the argument from the Kim and Jang lawyers was like, you have your Taekwondo same moves, but how you do it and in, you know, what form, like combination format, that starts to then eventually create individualized situation. But I don't even know if they went so far as brand. You know, can you brand a sequence of Taekwondo? So they're trying to say like that's how ridiculous these claims are. And not only that, the choreographers that were aligned with New Jeans, apparently they left HYBE. Okay, they talked a big game, but they left because they probably don't want to be too close to this hot fire. And we got to see a lot more dialogue from the hearts, I think, more of the minds of the CEOs of Source Music and B-Lift. So the Source Music CEO, that's essentially was the birthplace of New Jeans, like where a lot of the members came from, that he scouted, he trained, he developed, and apparently he was the one that arranged the appearance of the New Jeans girls in a BTS music video. And then it was very odd, like how then that appearance, which who would not want to be in a BTS music video as a rookie K-pop group? That is the best help whatsoever. But then there was like, sometimes they said like, oh, that was horrible. How can you force us to be in a BTS music video? And then the other time they were like, oh, we thank our New Jeans mama for putting us in the music video, where neither one was true, or essentially it was like the Source Music CEO being, doing solid there. And then only to have these girls snatched up and taken away and then be maligned for it and not justly compensated for it. So you can see, this is a cold rage. This is rage, I think, by the Source Music and B-Lift Lab people. And, well, we do know the creative director, she has a hot way of doing her cold rage, with the middle finger lace glove Instagram post. I still think that's really funny. So this is just a mess here, and it's going to continue along. So the judge is essentially saying like, okay, we need to, continue this. It's sort of like, let's continue this conversation, which basically means like each side do more work to prove your case so that it's easier for me to make a judgment and write the summary. That's what you pay them for, but I don't know what you pay the judge for. But the judge is also saying like, we do have to see ultimately whether this was done by the defendant, Min Hee-jin, making statements that are factual, and whether the facts, like who gets to determine the facts. Like, is it like, oh, this is what the general public would see as copying, or no, this is what an expert would see as copying. So that's a little bit, that's basically he's saying like, please make the decision for me by making the strongest argument, like which one. And really at the core of it is whether this was intentionally malicious, because B-Lift Lab's attorney said that the defendant, yes, had malintent and searched for, the target of her attacks and did it through anonymous comments and attacked fandoms and groups that would be potential competitors one day. Remember, we already know that Min Hee-jin had this huge fetish about like being the first girl group to debut, and we already know that when we look at all of the evidence, it's also to help her establish that sort of queen bee, dominance within the corporate culture of having her girl groups, no matter what their ages are, but because they debuted first, being the elders so that all the other girl groups would have to bow to. You do that enough, then that starts to get into your brain, and then you start to naturally push other people down in the pecking order. That's what she's trying to do. That's what they teach at the Jezebel Institute of Treachery. And the latest now is that ADOR filed an injunction against New Jeans prohibiting advertising contracts that New Jeans would make on its own. Already that is not allowed. Already under their exclusive contracts, that should not be happening. But while all of this fighting is taking its way in court, ADOR is also trying to signal to the rest of the business world that no, we are going to not only fight it out and prove that our contract is valid, but add this injunction. We know that Min Hee-jin herself loves the injunction conjunction. Well, this is like injunction karma. And ADOR filed their own injunction to forcibly stop New Jeans by an added legal oomph to not make their own contract deals. And of course, ADOR has to do this because right now, ADOR would look like a fool. They would look like a laughingstock of not being able to enforce their own contracts with advertisers or other third parties or vendors of a girl group that they signed. So if an advertiser is going to want to have NewJeans as a brand ambassador, and they actually have to discuss in their corporate boardrooms or meetings or whatever department takes care of it, that they actually have to wonder, do we have to make this contract with ADOR or do we have to make this contract with NewJeans directly? That is the absolute embarrassment for ADOR, that they, of course, are supposed to be the ones that sign the agreement, manage the agreement, not NewJeans itself. So it has to take a huge stand that they're the boss and not NewJeans. And the rest of the corporate world is also gonna be thinking they're on shaky ground if NewJeans gets its way, because that means any other little entity within your organization can just act on its own and there are no legal ramifications for it. ADOR is also signaling that we have been doing everything right. We are fulfilling our side of our obligations under this exclusive contract with NewJeans, and we just want to be able to make sure that before they get themselves more deep in the mud, that they can come to their senses and come back. So this injunction was filed. Of course, we have to wait for the judge to actually rule on the injunction. And meanwhile, there is already a pending case that was filed by ADOR on December 3rd of last year. Remember, like a few days after NewJeans said like, oh, well, we're done with our contract. We unilaterally decide to cancel it. So those two legal mechanisms are working its way through the court system. But ADOR is trying to signal that it's doing everything it should be, everything that a good company would do, and leave the door open even to people who have betrayed them in this situation because they honor the contract. Probably, none of them could probably stand them, NewJeans cookies, but they're still honoring this contract because they don't even know where these cookies have run off to. Because for one thing, there are now reports saying that like Hanni may have, been on the, she on the run now as an illegal immigrant, or she went back to Australia to sort out her visa situation because apparently her visa had expired, and ADOR is just saying, hey, we already got the paperwork ready, which is a huge plus. But now Hanni's gonna really see what bullying is by going to the Korean immigration office herself after somebody reported her. Now, this was kind of spiteful. It was kind of like a hater, but apparently in December, there was somebody anonymously who reported Hanni as an illegal immigrant due to the status of her visa. So she has a lot of things to resolve because by accepting ADOR's offer to be sponsored as an employee or a business partner to work legally in Korea, then she's essentially acknowledging that the exclusive contract remains valid with ADOR. But if she wanted to get a same visa situation, E6 visa for entertainers under a different company, then that would violate her exclusive contract and get her more into trouble and get the group in trouble with the law. People have been saying that there may be a workaround loophole for Hanni. Maybe she would be able to get an investor visa. So I looked into this. You basically need to have about 500 million won or more, like $400,000 to $500,000, depending on the exchange rate. And you would get an F2 resident visa. There are two options. If you're interested in how you maybe if you want to buy your way into Korean residency, you invest this money into a fund set up by the Ministry of Justice, operated by Korea Development Bank. And so this fund is going to fund investment projects in Korea, especially to help out areas that are underfunded and create new jobs. And it's a risk-free investment, and you get all of your money back after 5 years. But you don't get any interest, you don't get any gains, you lose out on the opportunity of that money making money for you, but there's absolutely no risk. You get your entire investment capital back. So that's option one. The second option is a risk-based investment where you're essentially going to give your money, same thing, and then they're going to invest it into different projects that they will be consulting you on. And I guess you have to choose, but I would say don't choose any of these. Okay, just go the risk-free route, because I would not trust this, because you can lose your money, maybe 100%. I don't know. You'd have to really go look into it, but see what the upside and the downside could be. But nobody knows how this is going to work out. But if you want a potential to make money off of this as well, you can do the risk-based investment route. So those are the two options that Hanni could do if she wanted to get an investor visa. Why does Danielle not seem to have this problem? I think it's because one of her parents is Korean, so she goes under the F4 visa that allows people of Korean descent to have a different working and living visa that's not tied to an employer. So that's why Hanni is the one that is the kind of weakest link right now. A little bit ironic that she had the red carpet rolled out for her in the National Assembly, the place that is the epicenter of creating and upholding Korea's laws, and now she looks like she's running from the immigration law. So that was a big legal drama that's involving New Jeans, Min Hee-jin, and the sub-labels within HYBE. And it's just a mess because it's going to be more prolonged, because these court dates are, even if they are accelerated, they have weeks in between. And so there's interval, update, until it can get to a ruling, and then that ruling can be appealed and then appealed again. And so this is a long slugfest, but it doesn't look like Min Hee-jin can really, how long is that, cookie gonna be, fueling that engine? It is a limited runway for Min Hee-jin and the New Jeans girls, but for HYBE, they can play the long game, and they did mess around, and now they are finding out when actual reality starts to hit them in the face. All right, guys, what do you think? Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.